You paused a video once, just for a second, to think about something, and when you looked up, 20 minutes were gone. You don't remember the last thing that was said. You weren't asleep. You weren't even tired. You were somewhere else, somewhere better. And here's the part nobody tells you. You're probably doing it right now, half listening to me, while a small part of your mind has already wandered off to rehearse a conversation, replay a memory, or build a world that doesn't exist. That's not a flaw in you. That's a level. Because daydreaming isn't one thing. It's a staircase. It starts as something everyone does, harmless, human, even beautiful. And it descends, one step at a time, into something that can quietly take years of your life without you ever noticing they're gone. Today, you're going to walk down every step of that staircase. 7 levels. And I'll be honest with you now, somewhere on the way down, the descriptions are going to stop sounding like other people and start sounding like you. When that happens, don't look away. That moment of recognition is the most important part of this whole video. Let's begin at the top, where it's still innocent. Level 1, the casual escaper. At level 1, you barely notice it. You're on a bus, in a waiting room, standing in a queue that isn't moving. Your body is here, but your mind quietly slips out the back door. You imagine a conversation you might have later. You replay something funny. You picture a version of today that went slightly better than it did. Then the bus stops, someone coughs, and you're back. No harm done. You didn't even realize you left. And here's what's actually happening in your brain when this occurs. There's a network of regions neuroscientists call the default mode network. It switches on the moment you stop focusing on a task. The second you stop doing, it starts wandering. And for a long time, scientists assumed this was just your brain idling, wasted time, static. It isn't. When that network lights up, your brain is doing some of its most important background work. It's consolidating memories, deciding what to keep and what to let go. It's simulating the future, quietly running rehearsals of situations you might face. It's stitching together your sense of who you are. Studies suggest we spend up to a third of our waking lives in this state. A third of your life spent gently not here. So if you daydream, you are not broken. You are running standard human software. The default mode network is why a shower gives you an idea a spreadsheet never could. It's why the answer arrives the moment you stop chasing it. At level 1, this is a gift. It's where creativity is born. It's the small mercy that makes a boring afternoon survivable. In fact, you've almost certainly done it during this very video already. Drifted for a few seconds. Come back. Maybe you drifted during that last sentence. That's level 1, completely beautifully normal. But for some people, the daydream doesn't stay random and gentle. It finds a key, a trigger that unlocks it on demand. And the most common key in the world is one you're probably holding in your pocket right now. Level 2, the music triggered. Put your earbuds in. That's all it takes now. At level 2, the daydream stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you can summon. And for a huge number of people, the summoning spell is music. The first song starts, and within seconds you're gone, not just listening, but inside something, a scene, a story, a version of your life with a soundtrack swelling underneath it. You start to move, not to go anywhere. Walking just helps. Pacing the room, circling the block. Some people do this for 2-3 hours at a stretch, one song looping, completely dissolved into a world that only plays behind their eyes. And here's the detail that makes people at this level freeze when they hear it. Noise-canceling earbuds made it worse. Because now the real world isn't just quieter, it's deleted. Just you, the music, and the world in your head, with nothing left to pull you out. If you've ever upgraded your headphones and quietly noticed you started disappearing more often, that's not a coincidence. That's this level tightening its grip. There's a real reason music does this so powerfully. Music skips past your logical, analytical mind and plugs almost directly into your emotional core. The same systems that handle memory and feeling. So it doesn't just soundtrack the daydream. It fuels. It hands the fantasy a mood, a tempo, an emotional charge to ride on. And because memory and music are so tightly wired together, a single song becomes permanently fused to a specific daydream. Years later, you'll hear 3 notes of it and be yanked straight back into a world you built when you were 19. And that quietly creates the first trap of the entire staircase. Because now, if you ever wanted to stop, you'd also have to give up the music, and the music might be the only thing in your day that reliably feels good. At level 2, you're still daydreaming about scenes, things happening to you, around you. But at level 3, something new walks into the daydream. People. And they start talking back. Level 3, the conversationalist. Have you ever caught yourself mid-sentence, talking to someone who isn't in the room? That's the door into level 3. because here, you're not watching a story anymore. You're in a conversation with people who don't exist, or who exist but aren't there. You imagine telling someone about your day, in detail, and they listen the way you wish people listened. You rehearse an argument, and you win it, flawlessly, every single time, landing every line you'd never actually say out loud. You picture being interviewed, like you're someone worth interviewing, and you answer perfectly. Some people imagine sitting across from a therapist who asks exactly the right questions, and for once, someone finally gets it. And if you've ever caught your own lips moving, making a face, clenching a fist, then snapping back and praying nobody saw, you already know this level from the inside. People describe pressing their tongue against their teeth just to check whether they actually said it out loud in public. That's not you losing your mind. That's level 3. And it is far more common than anyone admits, because nobody admits it. Now here's the thing that makes this stage so quietly heartbreaking. Ask yourself what all these daydreams have in common. Telling someone about your day, winning the argument, being interviewed, being understood by a therapist. They are all the exact same thing. Every one of them is connection. Psychologists who study this describe the daydream as filling an unmet emotional need. Your mind, it turns out, cannot tolerate a vacuum. If you've spent large stretches of your life alone, genuinely alone, or just unseen, your brain doesn't simply sit in that silence and accept it. It manufactures the thing you're starving for. It builds the conversation you never get to have. It generates the warmth, the attention, the being listened to, and it delivers all of it by having the interaction with itself. It is, in the most literal sense, your mind trying to feed you. One person put it in a way that is almost impossible to forget. They said, "I've been alone most of my life, so I think this became my way of getting social interaction, just doing it with myself." Read that again, slowly, and ask, honestly, whether some piece of it belongs to you too. At level 3, the people are imaginary, but the world is still loosely your world, sitting on top of your real life. At level 4, that changes completely. Because at level 4, you stop borrowing from reality and start building a replacement for it. Level 4, the world builder. Now it has a map. By level 4, you're no longer decorating your real life with little fantasies. You've constructed an entire world, and you've been living in it, part-time, for years. It has characters, not vague ones, people, owns you know more intimately than some of your actual friends. You know how they'd react. You know their voices. The world has a history, timelines, relationships that formed and shattered, wars that were fought, an entire mythology only one person on Earth has ever witnessed. Some people at this level admit that they've stopped anchoring their memories to real events. Instead of thinking, "Back when I was 12, they think in terms of eras and events, inside the world they invented. The imaginary timeline has started to feel more real than the calendar on the wall. One person described building a complete universe, characters, environments, visuals, storylines, and daydreaming endlessly about turning it into a cartoon. Getting the recognition, being celebrated for it, all of it vivid, detailed, emotionally real, and none of it ever made. And then they wrote one line that lands like a quiet gut punch. I had successfully outplayed myself in my own game. Stop on that line, because it exposes the trap hiding underneath all the fun. Here's the mechanism, and it's crucial. When you imagine achieving something, vividly, with detail and genuine emotion, your brain releases a portion of the same reward chemistry it would give you for actually achieving it. The pride, the recognition, the glow of, I made something that matters. Your brain, in that moment, cannot fully tell the difference between the vivid rehearsal and the real event, so it pays you early. And that is the problem, because motivation runs on a gap, the gap between where you are and the reward you don't have yet. But if the daydream has already handed you the reward, the applause, the finished thing, the version of you who's admired, that gap collapses. The hunger that would have driven you to actually build it quietly dissolves. Why climb the mountain when your mind has already given you the view from the top, in full color, tonight, for free? And here is the cruelest irony of level 4. The people who reach it are almost always the most imaginative and the most ambitious. The exact creative horsepower that could build something extraordinary in the real world is the very thing keeping them from ever starting. The gift and the trap are the same organ. This is the precise point where daydreaming stops being a break from your life and starts becoming a substitute for it. Up to here, you could still argue it's harmless, still fun, still yours. But what happens the day you decide you've had enough and you actually try to walk out of the world you built? That's where level 5 is waiting, and it's where a lot of people discover something that genuinely frightens them. Level 5, the one who can't stop. So you try to quit. And that's when you learn the thing nobody warned you about. You can't put it down. Because think about how you quit anything else. Gaming, drinking, endless scrolling. Every other habit has a thing you can physically remove, unplug the console, pour out the bottle, delete the app, throw the phone in a drawer. But you cannot remove your own mind. You can't leave your imagination in another room and walk away from it. The source of this addiction is the one thing you carry with you into every moment of every day. As one person said, almost in disbelief, you can't do that when your own mind is your entertainment. At this stage, the daydreaming floods everything. You do it every single minute. You're not being actively forced to focus on something else. You lose the hour before sleep, lying in the dark, just one more scene, one more conversation, until 3 hours have vanished, and you're somehow still wide awake. People describe it as a switch they can no longer reach. They know they should stop. They genuinely want to stop, and it simply takes over anyway, especially the moment they're tired or bored or alone. This is the stage where clinicians stop calling it a quirk and give it a name: maladaptive daydreaming. Maladaptive just means it has started actively interfering with your real life, your work, your sleep, your relationships. But here is the single most important thing in this entire video, so listen closely. Maladaptive daydreaming is almost never the root problem. It is a symptom. It grows on top of something else. Look at what it so often sits beside: depression, where the real world has gone gray and numb, and the daydream is the only place color still exists. Anxiety, where the daydream is a controlled world, one where nothing can hurt you because you're writing every line. ADHD, and this one matters because the ADHD brain is chronically understimulated, quietly begging for input. Real life feels unbearably boring, so the mind manufactures its own high-intensity entertainment on demand. And trauma, where daydreaming began in childhood as a genuine escape hatch, a way to psychologically leave a room you couldn't physically leave. For a frightened child, dissociating into a safer world isn't a disorder, it's survival. It's brilliant, actually. The tragedy is only that the escape hatch stays welded open long after the danger is gone. Which is exactly why "just stop daydreaming" is such cruel, useless advice. As one person put it, telling a maladaptive daydreamer to just stop is like telling a wounded bird to jump off a high-rise and then blaming it when it can't fly. You do not rip away the one shelter someone built to survive and call that a cure. But if that shelter stays standing long enough, if the years keep quietly passing while you're inside it, you eventually arrive at the level nobody wants to reach, the one where you finally look up and see exactly how much has gone. Level 6, the empty one. The daydream is still here. Everything around it is what's missing. At level 6, nothing dramatic happens. That's what makes it so devastating. There's no crash, no rock bottom scene. You just look up one ordinary day and realize you're older than you thought you'd be by now. The years that were supposed to hold friendships, a career, a person to love, an actual life, somehow they went by while you were somewhere else. You were busy. You lived an entire rich, detailed second life. It just wasn't this one. And this one is the only one that counts the days. There's a moment people describe that stops them cold. They heard the words. Before you know it, you're 30 years old and your life is empty. And something in them broke open. One wrote back, "I'm sitting here as a 30-year-old, realizing I've been caught in this cycle, and my life feels empty. I feel called out." Then another. "That's exactly how I feel. I'm 32. Then another, and another, and another. A whole quiet chorus of people who looked up at the same time and saw the same empty room. If you're younger right now, I need you to hear them, not as a threat, but as a warning shouted back up the staircase by people already standing on this step, hoping you'll stop before you reach it. Here's the mechanism that makes level 6 close like a trap. Daydreams are frictionless. In your head, you skip every hard part. The love arrives with no risk of rejection. The success arrives with no years of failure. The recognition arrives instantly, perfectly, on command. And once your brain gets fluent in that frictionless reward, real life starts to feel unbearably slow, clumsy, and disappointing by comparison. Because real life makes you earn everything, slowly, with the constant possibility of pain, so you retreat a little further into the world that never rejects you, which makes your real life a little emptier, which makes the daydream even more tempting. That is the loop. Round and round, tightening, each turn stealing a little more of the actual world. And one person described the bottom of it more honestly than any textbook could. They said the daydream had stopped being fantasy. It had become living inside their own head as a completely different person. Someone loved, someone accomplished, someone who mattered, and that version had become fully automatic, running in the background through every ordinary task, while the real world, and every real emotion attached to it, simply faded to nothing. They weren't visiting the daydream anymore, they were living there, and only visiting reality. This is the bottom of the staircase. This is where daydreaming takes the most and returns the least. Sit here for a second. If that last level felt less like a description and more like a mirror, if you recognized yourself in that empty room, I'm not going to rush you past it. That recognition hurts. Let it hurt for a moment. That ache you're feeling right now is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's the exact opposite. It's the first honest thing that has to happen before anything gets better. Because the people who reach that empty room are the same people who found the way out. And what they discovered changes the meaning of every level you just walked down. Level 7. The return. The daydream was never the enemy. That's the truth the whole staircase was hiding from you. Go back and look at what your mind was actually doing. On every single step, it gave you comfort when you were in pain. It gave you connection when you were alone. It handed you a sense of power, safety, and worth, precisely when the real world was offering you none of it. That is not a broken mind. That is a mind, fighting to keep you alive, with the only tool it had within reach. And it's the same tool, understand this clearly, that writes every novel, designs every world, composes every piece of music, and pictures every future worth walking toward. The imagination that ran your escape and the imagination that could build your real life are not two different things. They are one engine. The problem was never that you can imagine. The problem is only what happens when imagining becomes the only place you're allowed to live. So the way out was never to kill it. It was to give it a door back into reality. And listen to how people actually climbed out, because not one of them did it by force. One person said that the moment they started building the real version, the company, the fitness, the skill, the actual thing, the daydreams quietly stopped on their own. They didn't have to fight them. They just no longer needed them because reality had finally become worth being present for. Another learned to treat the daydream as a reward. Instead of a prison, do the real work first, and then, at night, let the mind wander freely as the treat you earned. And another took the entire flood pouring through their head and aimed it at a single channel, a page, and became a writer, turning the private worlds into stories other people could finally step inside. None of them killed the daydream. They gave it a job. They gave it a door. So here is the real question, the one to carry with you long after this video ends. Not, how do I stop daydreaming? But, what is my daydream trying to tell me I'm missing? Because your daydreams are not random noise, the thing you keep returning to, the connection, the recognition, the version of you who is finally enough. That is not a fantasy to be ashamed of. It's a map. It is pointing, with perfect accuracy, straight at the need your real life hasn't met yet. Your mind already knows what you're starving for. It's been showing you every single night. The staircase goes down, but it was always built so that you could climb back up. So, which level are you on? The casual escaper? Drifting on the bus? The one with the song that unlocks another world? The one having conversations with people who aren't there? The world builder who outplayed themselves? The one who tried to quit and couldn't? Or the one who looked up and felt the weight of the missing years? Be honest with yourself, because part of you knew your level before I even finished describing it. You felt the recognition land somewhere in the middle of this video, and then, maybe, you drifted off thinking about it, and had to pull yourself back. That drift is not the problem. That drift is the invitation. The people who make it back up the staircase don't do it by hating their imagination. They do it by finally turning to it and asking what it wanted all along, and then building that one thing, slowly, in the real world. One frictionless dream, traded for one real, difficult, actual step. If any of these levels felt a little too much like looking in a mirror, tell me in the comments which one. Not because I need to know, but because the first time someone says it out loud is very often the exact moment the climb begins. And if you're still genuinely not sure whether you drifted off at some point during this video, you already have your answer.